Maori indigenous rights movement has made several achievements, including the establishment of the Waitangi Tribunal, the return of some Maori land, and the renaissance of the Maori language, and its recognition as an official language in 1987. I wanted to ask you where things stand today, but I think we've got a flavor of that.
Yeah, look, I was privileged on the weekend, just gone, to attend the reunion of a group called Ngā Tamatoa. Ngā Tamatoa was the original Maori protest movement in the 1970s. I was a member of that as a young, my wife and I just gotten out of school, we joined. And they'd never had a full reunion until this weekend just gone. And one of the things that was raised there was, regardless of the fight of those era and the issues that we'd raised, in fact, Māori was still at the bottom in all of the wrong statistics. So, although there had been positive moves in certain areas, it had not changed the basic condition within which Māori live. So, yeah, it's great about the language, but there's a whole lot of other things that are holding it back. Yeah, it's great about the land and the treaty settlement, but for your audience, no tribe received a settlement higher than 3% of the value of their claim. 3%, so all they got was 3 cents in the dollar. That's hardly justice. That's hardly, due compensation. That's basically shutting the door and say, here's your 3 cents, shut up, don't come back and argue anymore. So I just come back from a conference in Australia where the Aboriginal people spoke often of the advantages that we've had or that we've created. And I said to them, look, one of the things I've learned is that there are things we can learn from you, things that you can learn from us, things that we can learn from our Tahitian brothers and sisters, Hawaiian, Samoan, Tongan, Native American, First Nations in Canada. And I'm not sure who said this, but none of us is free until all of us is free. So don't sit across the ditch and say, oh, you Māori have everything, because we don't. We have challenges. We have a bright future, but only as bright as we are prepared to make it.
What about that vision of harmony and mutual acceptance?
Which vision is this one?
The interviewer's vision, perhaps.
Okay, all right. Harmony and mutual acceptance. You know one of those statistics I gave you, those negative statistics, right?
I was going to come to it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's say that once we get Māori back up to 0, then we can start talking about the possibility of a harmonious future and a positive national narrative. But at the moment, my job is still to bring us from this level to 0. Does that make sense?
Yes. I think... okay, I'm new to this, so let's
carry on.
Let's talk about the statistics. Now, in 1860, Maori were the least represented ethnicity in the prison system, and today they make up 50. That's half of the prison population. Even population-wise, according to the official stats, they're just about 15%. It is said that most Maori offenders who enter the justice system are disconnected from their marae and have little connection with Maori culture. Do you agree with that assessment?
Let me just say, it's exactly the same narrative you'll find in Australia for the Aboriginal people, in Hawaii for the Hawaiian people, and in America for the Native Americans. Exactly the same narrative. That disconnection is true. And it's the reason why we value having kohanga reo, Māori language nests, and kura kaupapa, because we have the opportunity there to help to grow our children in more positive ways. in ways in which they are more connected with their marae, with their people. It makes them better citizens and stronger people so that they are positive contributors to society later on in life.
So language as a main
Language, well, it's the vehicle.
Yeah.
It's the vehicle by which we are able to introduce more positive ways of young children looking at themselves and seeing their role in the world. And I'll take a second here to give you an example. I was in Australia about 10 years ago. I noticed there was a whole lot of young Maori at this festival, a Ngāpuhi festival, a Maori festival. They were clean, healthy, tidy, really positive. And I was talking to the chairman of Ngāpuhi at the time, and I said to him, you know what the difference is? I said, I know a lot of these kids, and you know them, they're from Kaikohe, which is a really depressed rural area where we live. And he said, yeah, no, they come over here. I said, no, you know what it is? I'll tell you what it is. When they fly over to Australia with their parents or with themselves, when they're in Australia, the narrative about drugs and alcohol and domestic violence and theft and murder and abuse, child abuse, etc., 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 that narrative is about Aboriginal people, which means Maori are no longer having to live with that on their shoulders when they're in Australia. They are free to fly. And it's why I think Maori people do so well in Australia. But back here, our children grow up and that narrative sits on their shoulders from the day they can understand what the media is saying. That they are the children of thieves and murderers and drug addicts and domestic violence perpetrators, etc., etc. Do you know what I mean? There is
So you're referring to a negative image, self-image?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was surprised about it in Australia. I got talking to some of the Maori people over there, and I found that a lot of them didn't even recognise it until I talked to them about it. And I said, oh yeah, that's true. That they often supported Aboriginal causes, but in a way that we can, or we can choose not to. But we can fly if we want to, because we don't have that on our shoulders anymore. Back home here, however, they grow up and it's with them all of their lives.
I'm trying to connect the dots here, and you said Maori.
Now, okay, in that situation, that negative self-image is hardly a self-image. It's an image that's perpetuated upon the children from the time they're little about their people, about their families, about their history, about their current state, and about their future. That leads to the kinds of things that lead them into prison. That, you know, it's almost like their future is written for them, and it's an ugly one.
Okay, so I want to connect the dots, and you mentioned Te Reo Maori language. But these Maori kids growing up in Australia, how are they still? Is it possible for them to move ahead positively without or with? Where does, like in the example you said in Australia, sure, how does Te Reo fit in that particular example?
I think at home here, Te Reo becomes the blanket that you can wear, which is almost like a bulletproof blanket. It keeps a lot of that from getting through to you, because you can turn to your language, you can share with others in your own language in a way that you recognize your value, you recognize your identity, you recognize your history, and you recognize a future for yourselves. That's why it's so important over here. Not so important in Australia, because without all of the other levels of racism upon them, they are able to be like any other citizen in Australia except Aboriginal people. They can be like anybody else, and they can fly. And they do really well. I was just talking to my grandson. He's in Australia. He's working at a gym, and he's about to buy his own gymnasium. I could never see him doing that over here.
Okay, I want to go back to Te Reo, and I think Maori language. I know you talked about racism quite a few times in this interview, but many or most New Zealanders, and I mean non-Maori New Zealanders, support Te Reo, and so the question to you is in our lifetime, would we be able to see Te Reo as a compulsory subject in primary school, for example?
There's no reason why we can't. There's no reason why we can't. And there's no reason why it shouldn't. Every child, regardless of who they are, their chances of success in later life is enhanced by them knowing more than one language. You, for example, know more than one. You must know your native language and probably a couple of others, as well as English.
Yeah.
I, unfortunately, only know two, Maori and English. But I know already I'm more advanced than a person who only knows English, because I can communicate with others here in Aotearoa and in other parts of the Pacific as well, by speaking a language that other people can understand. So I can grow in ways that a person who's limited to one language can't. So yes, the compulsory speaking of Te Reo is something which will enhance every child.
Teaching, that is, yeah.
Well,
as a school subject.
Yeah. Learning it.
Yes.
Being compulsory. It just means that every child has a basic understanding of Maori language, and as they slowly start to understand the language, they start to see the value in some of its history and some of its words. And I'll give you an example of how important their language is. Two of my elders, both of whom were fluent in Maori, were on a radio show that I used to host. And the first 10 minutes, and they were on opposing sides of the fence, the first 10 minutes was all in Maori. And it was a wonderful conversation, very challenging, but very positive. We then had a music break. And when they came back on, for some reason they started speaking English. And within 5 minutes they started attacking one another. So I played another song and I said to them, you switch back to speaking Maori or else I'm going to shut this interview down. And when they went back to Maori, they were as strong and as opinionated as they had been when they were in English, but because they were speaking Maori, there's no words in Maori that bring the level of personal nastiness that English can bring. Which leads you to that comment that I may have made. No.
Well,
so that's why Maori is such a really good language. It's a language of love.
Okay, so the next question is about families.
Sure.
Now, according to the latest census, one-parent families, these are basically two related questions. One-parent families represent 34% of Maori families. The portion is 15% for European Pakeha families. Compared with 50 years ago, would you say that Maori family ties are stronger, weaker, or the same? I'm asking this question. There's another related question,
Sure.
and that is about a hypothesis that young persons who join a gang do so because they come from a broken or one-parent family, and that the gang provides them with a sense of belonging to a family or tribe. So I'm just talking about,
Well, the answer is yes. The answer is yes to both questions. But the reality is we are not one-parent families by choice.
Yes, yeah. I think sometimes.
So we do need to, and again, that's a good thing about the Maori, kura, kohanga, the whānau. Another one of my grandsons has just started at kohanga reo. And I'm so happy because I've seen my children go through it, seen my other grandchildren go through it. It sets them in a positive frame of mind for life. And I think that a lot of our children, a lot of our families have gotten away from that. And in their desperate search for something, they've ended up with alcohol, with drugs, and lost touch with their ability to hold faith with the things that are important. And the things that are important in Māori, in the Māori world, are not drugs and alcohol, they're whānau. They are whānau at all times. Whānau is desperately important, and I see a young man I know used to live with us because he was having trouble when he was a boy. He's now a grown man, a working man. He's struggling, but he still tries to stay close to the upbringing he had through our kura, where our school, and he tries to stay close to a lot of those people, and they help to keep one another protected. But kura kaupapa are only a very, very small part of the Māori world. I wish we could have a lot more and help to rebuild that family feeling that a lot of people have lost in the Māori world.
I know we're running out of time. There's one final question, and
Sure.
that is about mental health,
Mm-hmm.
which is affecting many regardless of socioeconomics or ethnicity. Now, in New Zealand, we have one of the highest suicide rate for young persons in the OECD, and there have been a few high-profile youth suicide cases in Northland. What have you been able to see or hear from on the ground?
It's a scary, scary situation, because it's so hard to read. You can see it in desperately lost people, but it's almost difficult to try to turn around. One thing I always turn to is Mike King. Used to be a comedian, is now a real activist for young people. He's taken his beliefs about youth suicide to schools all around the country, and one thing I know is that the kids, they hear what he has to say, they listen to what he has to say, they engage with him about what he has to say. He's come up with a program called Tū Kotahi, which isn't about other people telling kids what they have to do. It's about kids, and it was written by kids at secondary school, about kids learning to share with one another, to care for one another, and watch out for one another. It's about peer support.
Community too.
Yeah. So, in terms of that, I don't know what the real answer is, but I think that Mike is onto something special here. Don't let it be an answer that's directed by government. Government can fund the program, but the solution must come from within the whānau and within those young people themselves. I mean, for example, this current government is talking about putting a health professional in every school. But if those kids already aren't talking to the teacher, a lot of them aren't even talking to their parents, they sure ain't going to talk to a doctor. But one thing we do know is they are talking to one another. If they are talking to one another, then maybe that's where that help should go.
Okay. So we're running out of time.
Sure.
Do we have any parting message from you?
It's a phrase I learned from a guy in jail. I was visiting him. He was in jail in the Philippines, and he was likely to face the execution squad. Luckily, he didn't have to. He got out. But I used to go in to visit him, and he was so really positive. I said, "How can you be happy? How can you be positive?" He was a priest, Father Ed de la Torres, his name was. He said, and something I always remember, happy are those who dream dreams and are prepared to pay the price to make those dreams come true. And he said, that's why I'm happy, because I'm prepared to pay whatever price is required if it's going to mean a better life for others after me, or a better life for children outside this place. And I thought to myself, wow, that's a pretty awesome experience. For most people, you don't have to choose life and death, but happy are those who dream dreams and are prepared to pay the price to make those dreams come true. For many of us, it's just a little thing like a bit of money to a guy who's homeless, helping an old lady who's got too much shopping in her bag, helping somebody find a house, helping somebody see a doctor, helping somebody find a home. We can all do a little bit and it will make us feel better in what it is we want to achieve in life.
Okay, words of wisdom. Okay, thank you again for accepting the invitation.
Kia ora.
Thank you.